Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, our guest today is a very accomplished author, Ann Kate Sullivan. Ann Kate Sullivan is the author of 12 published books, including a book about natural healing called Consider This: Recovering Harmony and Balance Naturally. She's also the author of 2 recent books, which she's going to tell us about, that have won some really significant awards. You can find out more about Ann Kate Sullivan and her wonderful work at AnnKatesSullivan.com. Welcome, Ann Kate Sullivan.
Hello, thank you for having me on the show.
Now, Ann Kate Sullivan, your books, The Legends of the Grail and Heroines of Avalon and Other Tales, are all about natural healing. And they help us remember that we are one with the land. And if we disconnect from the land, then it becomes ice and fire. But if we work in harmony with the earth, then we can finally find unity, healing, and peace. I know these books won some really significant awards. So can you share with us about the awards that you have won?
Yes, Heroines of Avalon and Other Tales is my most recent book. And 2 weeks ago, it won a gold with IPPY, which is the Independent Book Publisher Association. It won the IPPY Gold for Visionary Fiction. And then it won an award with Nautilus, which is a really excellent award. They have all kinds of best books for the better world. Mary's an incredible anyway, it's a great award, and I would look at all of those books, the Nautilus books. And so anyway, it won a silver for women's fiction. I'm thrilled about that award, and it is up. It's a cover finalist, so I'll know in a few weeks in Denver if we're going to walk down the red aisle or not, but I hope so. And it's up for a few more. Yes. So the other book also, Legends of the Grail, also won quite a few literary awards.
That's really amazing. And I was talking to Ann before we started recording that she must be a very hardworking lady. I'm about to publish only my 9th book. She's published 12 books. And, you know, those of us who publish books, we know how much work this is. Now, can you share with us a little bit about your book, Consider This: Recovering Harmony and Balance Naturally, that was published by the Findhorn Press?
Yes. So Consider This it's an older book. It was written in 1991, I believe, published in 93. And Findhorn, I don't know if you know the Findhorn community in Scotland.
Yes, I do.
Yes, you have. It's a wonderful community, open-minded people, thinkers, and one of the main things they do there is they work with nature spirits. So this book is on 12. It's an introduction to 12 alternative therapies. I get my friends and my kids to carry it around with them, because if they need a flower essence or a homeopathic or a tissue salt, or they can just pick it up and flip through the book, and it's a quick reference guide. Well, it's also used in the UK for new approaches to cancer. They actually use it as a sort of self-help and keeping your immune system up book.
Well, that's very, very important. Now, in your book, The Legend of the Grail, you describe the Grail as a symbol of healing. First of all, can you explain for us what exactly is the Grail and how can it help us heal?
Well, you know, I'm going to say what I think the Grail is, and of course this is something that's been discussed for 2,000 years and probably longer. But when I first started looking for the feminine face of the divine, I thought of that as the Grail. I thought of and so in the very first experience I had, of the feminine face of the divine was at the Chalice Well in Glastonbury, England. And I was really drawn. I grew up with a lay homeopath. My father was lay homeopath, and I'm in this world of natural healing and so forth. But there was something in my soul that was missing. It was something that I wasn't getting to with any other method. And so I went on a quest, and I didn't want to do a hero's quest. I wanted to do a heroine's quest. And as I discovered, a heroine's quest is really about learning to hear, learning to see, and learning to see in new ways. So our clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience. And so when you sit by a well in this Celtic tradition, what can happen is that the deity of the well can reveal herself. It's generally a Grail maiden. And so what you get, one of the things you get when you're going on your Grail quest is you might get your gift of clear hearing. I hear something, someone who can help me. Now, so having done a 35-year quest for the Grail, it's morphed over time. And now what I think, I'm gonna tell one story, and then I'll say what the Grail is. So in the Celtic tradition, if you feel you're missing something, if you feel you're missing a piece, you're feeling depressed or something not quite right at sunset, you climb on the back of the white swan, and you fly between the cracks of the world. And as the swan goes through the cracks of the world, it becomes a white swan. And I mean, the white swan becomes a black swan. And so you shapeshift with the swan. Now you're flying through the cosmos, through the black sky. And you collect all the parts of yourself where there's been trauma or upset or soul loss. And then right as the sun rises in the morning, you slip back through and the swan shifts from black to white, and then you sail back into yourself, and you're a whole being. So I've always loved this. Right? It's also Cygnus, so they say a lot of these old stone circles are aligned with the astrological Cygnus. So now what I think the Grail is wholeness. It's when we've found all the parts of our being, including the animals. We have to include the animals.
I think my little puppy here is having a meltdown because she's missing. Sometimes we just get a little overexcited.
Oh, well, maybe she wants to fly on the back of the white swan.
Come here.
Hello, look, she's got the black and white. She's like, look at me. I'm yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you're just a little needy, but at any rate, so you were saying, Ann Kate Sullivan.
Yes. What did you say?
I said you were saying before we were interrupted by our barking.
Yes, what I've discovered over all of these years of questing is that the Grail is actually when we find our true nature. It's when we find our, if you can think of it for a minute, it's all of our elements, our air, our fire, earth, the water, and they're balanced within us. And we've walked on the land, we've crawled into the ancient cairns, we've learned to listen to the earth, we've learned to listen to the animals because they have much to say, and so we've learned how to walk in harmony and balance. And that's why I think these stories are so important for this time, because we've lost, in this scientific age, we lost our connection, our deep connection to the mother, to the goddess traditions, to the indigenous people who they really understand how we live and work in harmony. And just think, gosh, if we just did that, we turn this whole issue we're having around in a heartbeat,
Yeah, and you were talking about the different psychic gifts. One of my 8 published books, Unlimited Intuition Now, explains how to open your clairaudience, your clairvoyance, your clairsentience, and your claircognizance, which is very much a part of listening at the soul level. Now, how do you feel that seeking the Grail can heal us?
So I'm going to take the Grail and connect it to the tradition of the Druids, because that's the current lineage I'm working with. So to be a Druid in the old days, and we're going back about 3,000 to 5,000 years ago. Now, well, up until the Roman invasion, let's put it that way, of Britain. If you wanted to be a Druid, and a Druid was really the sort of the shaman of the time, they were the priest or priestess, they were the people that held the spiritual wisdom of that age. If you wanted to be that, first you had to learn 250 stories of your people. So you had to locate yourself in a tradition. This is what my people are going to need, and they're going to encounter these different things, and this is how we walk through it. And that can take a long time. As we've noticed, writing 9, 12, however many books, right? It can take a while to get all this written down. After that, you might become an ovate. So in the Celtic tradition, then you learn to become a seer, you learn to hear, you learn. And what's beautiful about that is, instead of going, oh, they're crazy, as people might do in our culture, or not understand, it was an absolute lineage that was respected. And so when you work with that lineage of the ovate, you're learning to see not only for yourself, but and to dream for yourself, like the swan, right? But you're also learning to dream for others. You're able to walk into the dream world for other people when they're ill, or if they're dying, you can walk with them to the other side. So, and then, finally, after 20 years, maybe, you become a Druid. And so, and I think of a Druid means the people of the oaks. So, the Grail quest is really about finding our roots, our place in this world, what our soul really wants to share, in this lifetime. And so the Grail is an invitation to healing. And there are many, many different versions of it. There's also a Christian version where the Grail is the cup of Christ, or it might be the Magdalene, or the lineage of the Magdalene, or Sarah, the child of the Magdalene. It can be many, many different things, but it's always about healing.
That's just really beautiful story. And, there's something about stories, we can give people facts, but we can also tell stories. And I can't tell you, most of the time when I'm doing healing work, I find myself telling stories, because it's so much easier for us to understand a story. you know
Yes.
there's something about our brain and and really even our psyche, our soul level, where we understand stories sometimes even better than pure facts.
Absolutely.
And there's a place for research, there's a place for scientific evidence, but there's also a place for the story, because it helps us to find our own place on our soul journey in the story as we hear it, right?
Absolutely. I completely agree. And also you find out, as you're telling stories, as you learn stories, that, in the lineage of the bard or the storyteller, each generation has to retell the story. And they're retold depending on what's happening in that particular generation. But if we don't retell the story, they're lost. So 35 years ago, when I was given this stipend to go and collect folklore, I was walking through these very remote places in Ireland. I thought they'd be packed full of people because they were full of all kinds of wonderful things, but nobody was there. I was there with the sheep and some cows blocking the road, and and what I found in some of these places, they're called the thin places, is that if you go to the thin places, there are actually stories that are etched into the landscape. And if you sit quietly, you're working with your clear hearing, you begin to hear the stories of the land. Yes. And then there's other places like La Crue and Newgrange and some other places. Also, there's a place called Bryn Celyn in Wales. where at certain times of the year you would actually crawl into these places and put your back up against the stones so that you could understand the dreams of the earth. How is she dreaming? And then you could understand your own dreams in context with her. These are the seeds that are here. This is what wants to blossom. And if if you look at the news now, I don't think we're doing that collectively, but we certainly could be.
Now, Ann Kate Sullivan, you write that disconnecting from the feminine and the land creates a wasteland, a disruption in weather patterns, and basic discontent, even despair. How do we create our way back to wholeness and unity?
So in Arthurian legend, so this is well known both in the Celtic tradition and in Arthurian legend. So in the Celtic tradition, I love this. In the Celtic tradition, the goddess of the land, the goddess of sovereignty, has to give a man permission to be a hero or a king or a leader. And without that, he can't really do that. He's a half man. He's just, he's impotent. He's basically, he's not a virile man. So you put the two together, you put the woman together who is a seer, who can hear, who intuits, the ovate, man can then step up and fully lead. And it does, I don't know if it really has to be gender-based, but the idea is that what's rational and what's magical need to be married. And so in the story, I think most people know the story of King Arthur. So in Arthurian legend, there was a man named Amangons, and it's actually, if you look at his name, it looks like Amangon. So he had not found the goddess of sovereignty. And in his fury, he rapes a lot of the Grail maidens. And what happens is the Grail maidens say, forget this, and they pull their energy away. And the land goes into complete despair. So there's floods, and there's fires, and there's earthquakes, and there's all of this happens because he has stepped out of harmony and rhythm with the earth. So if you then follow a story like that, you can start at about the 12th century and get to the 5th century and then keep going backwards. You find that story told over and over and over again. Is don't get out of harmony and rhythm with the elements. Listen, go out and take your shoes off and put your feet in the soil and sing to the elements. I get up every morning and go out. I do that. I sing to the east, to the south, to the west, to the north, and the birds come and they sing with me, and then I'm attuned, I'm aligned. But we have to consciously do that all the time. Otherwise, what happens? We're moving out of sync, we're moving out of harmony. Our life doesn't work right. And you have to stop. Oh wait. I have to realign with my music, my music, and the music of this beautiful earth.
Yeah, and you bring up something really important in Kate Sullivan, which is the 5 elements. So, for example, acupuncture and Chinese medicine is based on balancing the 5 elements. And in feng shui, you balance the 5 elements in your home environment or your work environment. So it's all about bringing these different aspects, the fire, the earth, the metal, water, and wood, back into balance.
Absolutely. In the Celtic tradition, you do have 5, but the 5th one is considered to be lightning. I guess that would be metal, but anyway, they would consider the middle, and it's usually in the middle. They call it the lightning, and that's actually when your intuition comes on, and they call it the awakening of the Glastonbury. So the golden light, your golden light connects to the greater intelligence. So one thing I love about something when people say, what does the Celtic tradition matter now? And the thing is, I've always been a little psychic, a little intuitive, and when I was younger, it scared me. And so when I started working in the Celtic tradition, I went, oh, there's a whole lineage of these really awake, wise women, and they're called wikis. And they've been around for, gosh, the Cailleach is the oldest story in the first book. She's a 10,000-year-old story. And And so you go, I see. Actually, our role, our job is to be intuitive. Our job is to be magical. Our job is to remember how to talk to trees and animals and enter the enchanted worlds. It's actually important. And without that, we can fall ill. Our soul becomes ill, you know? So,
Now, in Heroines of Avalon and Other Tales, we learn about the heroine's journey. How does a heroine's quest differ from the hero's quest?
yes, we touched on it a minute ago, but let's go deeper with it. So in Arthurian legend, well, Joseph Campbell made the Hero's Quest famous, but in Arthurian legend, we'll see King Arthur, and King Arthur is in my research, I found he's not a person, it's a title of a person who carries an energy in an age. So, but let's say Arthur has to go into the underworld to find his four hallows. So that's again a repeated refrain. He has to go find his grail, his sword, his spear, and his stone. So when Arthur goes riding in as a war hero, he's probably going to ride into the underworld and try to snatch it from one of the like Cerwydden or one of the crone goddesses. And so there's a movement, there's a lot of action, and you're discovering who you are as an individual, and that's really important. Heroine's Quest is a little bit different because instead of going to slay a dragon, you're probably going to go into the underworld to talk to the dragon. You're going to listen to the dragon. Ah, okay. And then you're going to understand something about power. Instead of claiming power, we're going to understand what power is and how it functions and when it's dangerous and when it's helpful. So, yeah. So we're going to find our treasures. We're going to learn to go to the spring and listen to the Grail maiden that's there. You know, or the fact that when we're with water, it's easier to tap into our guardian angels, our inner voices, our inner self. So that's really what we do on a quest. When we go on the heroines, I take people on them sometimes. So they're very fun. And unless we have a big group, what I really like to do, if it's a few of us, is we do not plan. So we go with an intention. We go. Last time I went, we were looking for Ellen of the Ways, who's an ancient antlered goddess. She's the Shakti of England. She's like the Venus of the British Isles, of Wales, actually, more so. And so we were tracking her. And when you do something like this, or if you're looking for fairy folk or the Sidhe or some of these where you actually do have to enter an otherworldly type of consciousness, so it's a real thing. And that's why, again, understanding the Celtic legends and folklore is great, because then you have some kind of framework and you don't go into ontological shock. If you meet a fairy, you're ready for this sort of experience. So that's really what it is. You know, a heroine's journey is about allowing yourself to be a magical healer, creator, someone who loves the earth, who wants everything to thrive and everyone to thrive. It's a beautiful, and it was almost forgotten. These goddess traditions were almost forgotten. Yeah.
Now, what does asking questions or self-inquiry have to do with healing?
Okay, so my husband, my wonderful husband, he's an interesting character. He played with the Jets and the Bears, so he's an ex-middle linebacker, and he's a Sullivan, so he's one of the ancient Munster kings. So these people know how to read a field, right? They absolutely know how to read a field, and so when he finished football, he realized that he had been trained to be a killer. And he didn't know what to do next. He wound up going to India and becoming a yogi, and working with someone like Ramana Maharishi. You learn to ask questions, and in asking questions, you discover something more about who you are. So you might say, I mean, the famous one is, who am I? And you keep asking each other, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? And then, because you start to dissolve the ego and the dreams and illusions, and suddenly you might find the diamond of your true nature in there. And then you can start to live from an essential place. So my husband and I have a daily inquiry practice. We've done this for 15 years now, where we basically come up with a question, and for 15 to 20 minutes, I'll ask him, and then we swap and he asks me. There's no right answer. But what we've been able to do together, it really creates a yummy, delicious relationship. That's part of what it does, is you realize that this person that you're sitting next to is this cosmic mystery, and you'll never know all of them. It's this endless story. So, so we're still discovering this our true nature and what's there. And it's so beautiful, because when you ask questions like you're doing right now, it's an invitation. It's an invitation to share and to connect. And if you come in as an authority figure, you'll find a lot of times people will just block you. I don't want this information. Don't tell me what to do. Everything stops. And so if you can go back to this curiosity, the wondrous child, and just say, oh, that's really interesting. What happens next? How do we create our way out of an ecocide that we're currently in? So
now, are there healing practices and exercises in your books?
yes, there are actually quite a few. So what I did with each of the 2 books, I think there are 15 and 15 sections with visualizations, practices, and so forth, if you want to be able to connect to the land. What I did was because I'm an academic, I'm a PhD, so I gave the legends as they were given traditionally to honor the ancient ones. Then I went to each sacred site, and I allowed the deity of that site to influence me in the story. So usually they're told from the perspective of that particular deity, whether it's Danu, who's the mother of the Tuatha De Danann, or Anya, who's a solar goddess, or Skayach, who's a warrior goddess, or the Kaliach, who's the old woman of the world. They tell the story, so I have this felt sense of what they want to share now. And then after that, there's a section where there's a visualization to link in to that particular deity. There's usually an exercise with a tree. Because one of the easiest ways to tap into the other world is to work with a tree. And then there's a blessing and so forth also. But it's, a lot of people want to start awakening to these sorts of things, and when it starts happening they get a little worried, but we need to understand there's a huge awakening going on the planet right now. People are waking up all over the place, and so we need some guidelines about how we go about doing it. It sounds like this is also what you do very effectively.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, I mean, here at the Natural Healing Show, we talk to different experts from all over the world about natural healing and how we can heal ourselves naturally. Now, Ann Kate Sullivan, do you feel the 8-wheel calendar explained in Heroines of Avalon helps put us in touch with the earth and natural healings of nature? So rhythms of nature. And what exactly is the 8-wheel calendar? Most of us think about, 12 months of the year.
right, or 13 if we include the moon. But yes, so most of us have seen a Native American medicine wheel, and then most people would know that there's a winter solstice and a summer solstice and the spring and autumn equinox. And so if you want to add the magic back into it, because those are the masculine points, if you want to add the feminine back in, so it's a wheel, so we're talking about the Grail again, circle. You start February 1st is Imbolc. It's also known as St. Bridget's Day, but in the old days it was Days Day or Bride's Day or Bridget's Day. And that's the time when the first little dewdrops start to awaken. And so it's the time that the old woman of the world hands life back to the young maiden. And so that's a time where you begin to celebrate life. And then the next one, the feminine counterpart would be Beltane, which we just went through. A lot of people know May Day. People dance around the maypole, and it is a fertility rite. I mean, you phallic thing, dancing around it. So what we're doing is we're inviting nature to come and give us her beauty and her abundance, and then young maidens if they want to become pregnant, and so there's hand fasting ceremonies. And the other ceremony would be August 1st. It's called Lamas or Lunasa, and it's a harvest festival. And there are different celebrations you can do, but quite often you would light the fires to thank the deities for bringing us the great harvest, and we'd make meals together and dance together. Very famous in Ireland, in particular. And then the other celebration would be Samhain, and Samhain we now know is Halloween. But one of the things that's lovely about Samhain is they say this is the time where the veil is the thinnest. And so if you actually make an 8-week calendar, and there's a way to do it, it is in the back of Heroines of Avalon. If you make this 8-week calendar and you have to direct it, so for to the north, south, east, west, you create your own wheel. What you then have is a telephone to the other side, you see. And I grew up doing this with my father, actually in Virginia. And I think in the beginning we played with it. It was sort of this play that we did. It was a Native American thing. And I kept studying it because I was so curious about it. And actually, when he died last year, when he was getting ready to die, he said, "Would you walk to the other side with me?" And because we'd done this exercise, I said, "Of course," and I laid in the bed with him and we walked to the other side together. And so one thing that learning to, if we can really truly learn to open to the enchanted realms, to the other worlds, we don't have to worry about where we're going as much. We can have some kind of peace because we know that our ancestors love us and they'll always support us on our journey. And I did ask him at that point, I said, well, Dad, I'll do this with you, but I want you to leave me a sign that you're okay. And so when I went to the wheel, which is where I spread his ashes, it was in Ireland, there's a writing known as the Ogham. So it looks a little bit like the runes. It's sticks, right? So he had left, somehow this ladder had blown into a tree and it was hanging there right over the place, and it said elder for rebirth. So we all kind of gasped, with this sign. But these are wonderful teachings for the time that we're in right now.
Now, in Kate Sullivan, I know that you visited many ancient healing sites in Britain and Wales. What are your favorite healing sites in Britain and Wales?
Well, Wales is part of Britain now, so I'm going to include Ireland in that too. Also France. My quest really started at the Chalice Well in Glastonbury, in Somerset, England, and Glastonbury was considered for a long time to be the Jerusalem of Britain. So there have been pilgrimages. Some people say for 25,000 years there have been pilgrimages made there. And in the Celtic Church, they say the first church was made there. Some people say Mary Magdalene went, or her child Sarah went, so that you can go to the Holy Thorn. There's some lovely places to go and just feel into these energies, these very high energies. There's also a zodiac that's etched into the landscape. If you're in a plane, you can actually see the zodiac, and the Chalice Well is on the dove, the sign of Aquarius. So that's one of my favorite places. It's well known. Stonehenge now, when I started all of this, Stonehenge, you could sit there and have a picnic. Now it's really a museum, and there are hundreds of people around it, which is good news in that people are taking the site seriously. And yes. I think they're very alive now, these sites.
Yes, when I was a little girl, I lived in England, and there was a photograph of me standing in the middle of Stonehenge at age 6. But that's not, maybe that reveals my age, but you can't do that now.
No, you can't. But they do say, the mystics say that when you go to Stonehenge, and it's probably still important to go do that, each stone holds a set of codes. And so probably when you were 6, you got your codes. But another place that's lovely and not as well known is Avebury. Did you go to Avebury? It's another really, really lovely place to go. And this is a mile. Has a stone circle that's a mile in diameter. And the same thing, each one holds special codes. And then if you go off the beaten track more, there are places such as St. Nectan's Glen where if you're interested in fairies, the life of the fairies, that's definitely one place you can go. I always think of it as Nimwe's Glen. She was the lover of Merlin, and when you go in there, you know it's really a goddess. It's a goddess activation place. It's near Tintagel, which was the birthing place of King Arthur in mythology. And I can keep going because there are many places. One of the things in the books is that I point out some of these different places where you can do pilgrimages. In Ireland, I particularly love, well, the best known place is Newgrange, and now it's also kind of a museum. But you can also go to La Crue or some of these other places that are more remote, and you crawl in them. They have when you crawl inside, they said they're burial tombs, but I've been in long barrows. Long barrows are burial, that they're like going into a mausoleum, and there's something about the ancestors and the way that they've built them. They're very interesting. But a cairn is different, because quite often they're shaped like a 3-leaf clover inside, and each you sort of can see in a way when you go in. There's a grail here and a grail here and a grail here, and I think they're old, or a lot of them are old Asclepian temples. They're old healing temples that you would go into. And when it's time, we're running around doing our daily life. We don't necessarily want to be tuned into ancestors and all of this. And there's certain times when we're on our heroine's quest, or there's certain times in our life when we're in despair, or something's happened, some trauma has happened, where we need to go back and get in touch with our roots. We want to be in touch with our ancestors, someone maybe that we've loved very much has died. You can go back to those places, and you can really come out with a sense of wholeness and renewal, and understanding that this is a never-ending story. It goes on forever. We don't have to worry.
Now, Anne Kate Sullivan, you often travel to Glastonbury, which you spoke about. Can you tell us more about the healing qualities of the Chalice Well?
The Chalice Well it's a very powerful site. It's ancient. It's a very ancient place. It's known best now as a garden that was put into trust by Tudor Pole, who was a very famous healer after World War II. And he had a vision. He was a soldier, had a vision that he was going to survive the war, and that he was to go to this place and protect it, because it was such a very special and sacred healing sanctuary. And it is very well protected. And the water that flows, there's the well, and then there's it's called the Red Spring, and it flows, the red water, which is full of iron, flows through the mouth of a lion there. So people have gone for a long time for healing. But it's not just, yes, I think on a physical level, there's iron in the red spring and zinc in the white spring, but something happens to your soul in that type of place, in one of those thin places. You go, you walk in silence. Again, we're doing the heroine's quest. We're listening to we're going in. And there's something magical. If you can live in a way where you're 60% in and 40% out, you're actually much, much more creative. Believe it or not, you're not a facade. You're actually really coming from something real. And you go and you spend time. I think I've made pilgrimages there now for Well, I've gone at least, I have no idea how many times, but in the past 25 years, I've gone at least once a year. So there's something about returning, listening, understanding the next part of the quest, getting into, I love the ladies of the lake. I feel a real affinity with the ladies of the lake. So I feel presence of the dark mother there, or the goddess there. It's also known as the goddess stronghold.
Now, you mentioned there was a healer who was a soldier in World War II who felt called to go back to Chalice Well. So tell us more about that gentleman.
Tudor Pole. Tudor Pole, if I remember, I don't know the story that well, but I know he had a vision about the place. He responded to the vision. He went and bought, I think he bought it or somehow got the place in trust. There's a house there that you can stay in. If you become a Chalice Well member, you can stay in it's called the St. Michael's Cottage. And upstairs, there's a meditation room. There's a very famous meditation room. There are all kinds of stories about apparitions or visions of the chalice appearing. Many people have had spontaneous healings, all kinds of healings, cancer going away, all sorts of miraculous healings, all kinds of levels happening in that room. There's a very strong connection with Saint Michael, who in the ancient, some people say in the ancient Celtic tradition, he's actually going up Neath, and that they're very connected. But certainly with the Tor, so there's a well there. If you walk up the hill, it's called the Tor, and it's a bald mountain or hill. At the top there's the tower, and so that's said to be the masculine energy. The Chalice Well is meant to be the feminine energy. Both places, there's meant to be access to the underworld. In the Celtic tradition, that's not the hell realms. And the underworld is where you find your dragon, your power, your gemstones. You can find access to your ancestors, you find your depth, you find the tools that you need for this lifetime, you find your direct connection to the divine. So it's a very empowering kind of activity. Afterwards, there are also spirals that go up, so that you can spiral upwards and find connections to your guardians, to the angels, and to the other deities, intelligences, masters that work with you. And so that's it. So all kinds of people go there. A very strong Christian tradition there. I think really from all walks of life, people go. Strong Druid, goddess, Wiccan, all kinds of traditions go. And it's a wonderful melting pot. I love the way my experience is that people are interested. Anyway, everyone's interested in spirituality. So you share all kinds of perspectives, and you can really learn a lot together. And people are very open to dreaming, and so if you're a mystic, it might be worth the experience. The trip. Yeah.
All right. Now, do the Grail legends help us understand how we heal?
Yes, I think so. So in a lot of different ways, though. So it's a wonderful question. We're talking about the necessity of learning 250 stories, and so there's so many Grail stories. If we think of Mary Magdalene for a minute, how she's considered the Grail, and how finding that dark mother, finding the woman who was meant to be the church in some traditions. When we find that archetypal energy, I have a picture on my website of me rewriting the story of Mary Magdalene. Anyway, when we go back and we find these rich traditions, the cauldron of rebirth, what we can do after we have learned to navigate those stories is that we can begin to enter those dimensions and dream worlds ourselves. And so it's almost like this magic opens up for us. And at that point, and I'm sure you, as a medical intuitive, you must completely understand this. In that tradition, it's rather like a shamanic tradition, only in the Celtic tradition, then I've never really known anybody to take drugs. It's something that you actually trained to do, and it becomes part of your living everyday world. And so you start to consciously enter this dream world. And so let's say, for instance, I don't know, you're ill or you've hurt yourself. You can consciously enter that world to find out why, or someone is experiencing depression. You can travel into those worlds to find it. You can ride on the back of the swan, and the swan goes from white to black, and you collect what's needed. So I think right now it's so important for us to give up this idea of whether this is crazy or real or whatever. Let's just do it. Let's just go and find out what the earth needs. What do the whales need? What do the dolphins need? What do the oceans need? What do we need right now? Let's just go collectively dream it in together, go, okay, and we could hold hands and heal this earth. We're really good.
You've been listening to Ann Kate Sullivan, very talented lady, author of 12 published books. You can find out more about Ann Kate Sullivan at AnnKateSullivan.com. This is Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 bestselling author. You can find out more about me and my work at CatherineCarrigan.com and UnlimitedEnergyNow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. And remember, as you listen to your stories, you will find ways where your soul is naturally guiding you to health and wholeness. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.